In this video, I would like to show you the process I would use to build something very linear or boxy, let's say like a trash can, which however also has rounded or soft edges. So you can see that I have a curve layout which actually shows sharp edges. So that's the preferred approach because you can build the volume, the proportions really fast. And for example, for this body or design, rounded edges, transitions are more kind of like a feature which we can easily add afterwards. The advantage of this process is also I can select, for example, all those CV points and, for example, quickly adjust everything. And if I have my surfaces created, they will adjust to that as well. So I don't, at this point, have to deal with a complex model. And also I don't want to, such as having models with rounded edges. So now to create the surfaces, we can actually use maybe the square tool. The square tool, you basically have to select 4 edges that touch on each other. So you see I'm selecting just the profiles in this case, because I'm not blending between the edges of like a previous surface. And then let's take a look. So there we see that's, for example, how this part looks like. Very flat. And let's create a planar surface just for the bottom part. And this one we move to surface. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I mentioned before we can select all those CVs. So you see I can pick those. And now if I move those up and down, you see everything is going to be adjusted. That's the really nice part. If, for example, I would like to do some scaling. So let's say I'll take a look at this. You see those vertical curves all have actually the pivot point set to the center. So pivot point, alt, center. The main reason for why this is actually useful is I could go to this view, go to non-proportional scale. This is Y, so middle mouse button. And you see I move them away from each other or towards each other. So this is, for example, similar like the 3D cursor in Blender, for example, for those who had me. Pretty much the same idea. Now, another view, it's along the x-axis. Because it's a very symmetrical object, it really invites setting the curve layout up that way. Okay, that, for example, was for how we get the main bottom body done. Let's take a look at how we can work on the rim. Turning off the surface, you see I have those small spacer lines. They give me an idea of maybe how far I want to push something out. I can use the offset tool and click on those edges with shift button pressed, and this all looks somewhat okay. But if we go to a side view, you see there are kind of like at odd planes, and that's because I was doing this curve offset using the active view plane. You can use, for example, the geometry average, and looks like this. If I go to the top view and maybe set this to active again, let's see. Yeah, so nope. But what happens if I'm inside this orthographic view and then actually select those edges? And you will see then it looks good. So just FYI, you can use active view, but maybe try to be like in an orthographic view. Then when your object is laid out like planar, it will be working the way how you want. So now I can go into your perspective view and, for example, drag this one to the distance I want. Say offset. And there now, for example, I have my curve offset. The problem is, as you can see right now, there is a gap between. So what we have to do, we need to extend the stuff. So we go to the extend tool. So click yes, and we'll have to change the construction history, making this one nicely longer. And yeah, okay. So then, for example, we could go ahead and use our trim tool. So you click go. This curve, see what I click on, there's an arrow. I click inside this and this line. Press spacebar, select geometry to trim width. This one and this one. And you also notice that now my control vertices all snapped symmetrically back. When I extended them, those points got slightly moved. So here, spacebar, trim, trim. Nothing. This one, spacebar, trim, trim. Spacebar and trim, trim. Perfect. So there now I have a nice, how could I say that? Flat outline. I could actually, if I want to, for example, go with the EP curve and put in lines and then use the square tool. In this case, I can simply use the skin tool. There. And let's turn shading on. Click on this one. And for example, assign. Let's take a look. There's, you know, there we built the lip pretty linear. Okay, maybe at this point it might be interesting to make a small experiment. So I'm going to create myself a new layer, select all those surfaces, copy and paste, assign. And here now I'm going to apply the round edge tool. So you see I'm selecting all those edges. And maybe here I'm changing the corner style. Okay. Let's try this one first. Let's see. Okay. Something is not working there. Yeah, that's of course true. I totally forgot doing that. Select this one and revert. Yeah, the radius was way too big. So let's click maybe this one and then set this one, let's see, to maybe 25. So I didn't really build this object to scale, so that's the reason why the values are pretty big. I just sculpted this part without any specific dimension in mind. Okay, let's see. And I think this one looks a little bit better. So for example, we can maybe take a look at some corner style options. Build. So the bottom part got updated. And up here, yeah, that's a tricky one. So the problem is actually I have this edge. So 2, 2, 2, 2. I round all edges, just this edge I don't really round, so doesn't really do necessarily what actually I like it to do. So see, I might have to undo this one. Revert. So the problem is that this is made out of 4 parts and it has this edge inside. Best would be if I actually could attach those to be all one surface. So let's see what happens when maybe I click on attach and say connect, go. So there, and there. And let's do this again. There, there, and there. And yeah, so mentioned before, 4-sided surfaces is really what you want. So this is not really a good idea because I get really odd geometry. But this is actually not really a problem because what we're going to do right now is actually this. I'm going to create myself a planar surface out of this one, spacebar. This surface I'm going to move over to that layer. So, and then let's go to intersect U, so intersecting surfaces there. So you see they all line up, so from the side it's all the same flat surface, which is why it can't find this intersecting surface. Essentially this is not super perfect. You would want maybe to have a little bit of, how could I say that, overhang, just to be sure that everything really trims perfectly. So in this case, then I have to select trim. Here the opening I discard, and then here this overhang I discard, discard, discard. So this looks better. Now you see actually this surface does not have any of those corner edges along which we're not going to do any fillets. So when we go back to our round tool, maybe 35, this is like awfully small. And set all the corner options. Build. Let's take a look. See, much cleaner. So That was the trick. The edge here was really annoying and was not really helping us to make that surface work well. So now the question could be how, for example, would you like to finish this one? We could actually, in theory, uh, trim those sharp corners. They maybe are a little bit too sharp. We could also maybe select this one, delete it, so you just uh, keep this flange. All the surfaces you build, you don't necessarily have to keep. You can also just dump them at a certain point. But I hope that this exercise showed you how to maybe think ahead by trying to envision sharp edges, creating the profiles, the outline, kind of like a wire mesh, then creating in some basic surfaces, try to see how could you now progress or proceed with the design, and then maybe sometimes you have to make adjustments so you can go back, for example, those profiles I would need to lower a little bit, and for example then do your adjustment or assembly on the final piece.